What is up, everybody? It's CJ Plays here, and I'm back with another Sims 3 ranking video. Today we're going to be ranking every Sims 3 trait. Now, if you didn't know, there are 99 traits in The Sims 3. That is a lot of traits. Now, this isn't a complete list because it is missing the traits from the Pets expansion pack. So, Animal Lover, Cat Person, Dog Person, and Equestrian are not up here. At least I don't see them. But if I had to rank them, I would put them in the Sometimes Used. Because let's be real here, I mean, I feel like most traits in general are just kind of situational. You would only really use them if you needed to use them on a specific sim or something. So, it would go into Sometimes Used. I do have 3 categories. I have the Always Used, which means I use that trait all the time. Sometimes, which is of course just sometimes, and the last one I never use, meaning I just never use these. Now, usually when I play for YouTube and Twitch, I tend to randomize my Sims traits because I think it's kind of funnier that way, and you never really know what you're going to get when you randomize. But I'm mainly going to be basing this ranking video on my own personal gameplay, maybe a little bit of my Twitch and YouTube gameplay mixed in, but it's primarily my personal opinion, like when I'm just playing off camera. So keep that in mind, y'all. We can all have different opinions, but I want to know before we get started, how would you rank each of these traits? Like, what is your most favorite trait in The Sims 3? Doesn't even have to be Sims 3, in The Sims in general, okay? But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it though. So luckily for us, all of these are already in alphabetical order, which I'm happy about. I got my Sims 3 wiki website pulled up because some of these traits, I'm not gonna lie, I had to read up on because I was like, wait, what does this do again? So yeah. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. So first up, we have absent-minded. I never use this trait. Now, if my sim does happen to have this one, it's because it was randomized onto them. But if I'm playing normally, I never use this trait. It's kind of annoying to play around with because the Sims will sometimes forget what they're doing. You can go tell them to do a specific task and they'll start to do it and then they stop. And for the longest time, I thought that was because The Sims 3 was just being The Sims 3. But no, if I checked the Sims trait and they had this one, then I knew it was because the Sim did not just want to do it, which kind of just makes this trait annoying to play with because I'm a bit of a control freak when I play The Sims. I like for my Sims to do very specific things. When I say do something, do it. If my sim doesn't do it, we have a problem. So I never really use this one. Next up, we have adventurous. This is also going to go into never used category. This trait came with World Adventures and is supposed to be used to, you know, go on adventures and stuff like that. But I never do the World Adventure stuff because I don't ever use it. Like, I don't know about y'all. I just don't want to sit through an additional long loading screen. And when I play The Sims, I'm usually trying to do like family gameplay or like a challenge or something. And if it doesn't involve me going to one of the 3 locations like France, China, or Egypt, I just don't go. Like, I don't think about it. So I never really use this one, but I would say it is good to use if you want to do World Adventure gameplay. But for my personal gameplay, I just never use it. Next up, we have ambitious. Now, sometimes I use this one. I'm not going to lie. This one is a really good trait, especially if you want your Sims to get promoted faster in their career or something like that. Very, very useful. I don't always use this one because I do like for my Sims to struggle a little bit in their careers and stuff. But I would definitely say, like, maybe check out this trait if you want your Sims to advance kind of quickly in their careers and have a little bit of a leg up. I would say use this one. Next up, we have angler. Angler is going to go in my sometimes used. I was going to put in always, but I don't always use this one. I feel like I always fish in The Sims 3, but I hardly ever apply this trait to my Sims. So it's going to go into sometimes used. If you have a Sim that likes to fish or you're doing a challenge or something, this could be a very useful trait to apply to your Sim. Next up, we have artistic. Now, artistic is also going to go into sometimes used. Again, I like this one a lot because it does give you a little bit of an edge up when it comes to painting and stuff like that and doing art. You can sell the art for money. You know, it's just stuff like that that kind of makes it useful in my opinion. So I'm just going to put it in the sometimes used. Next up, we have athletic. Athletic is also something that I'm going to put in the sometimes used. I also like this trait because it just gives you a little bit of an edge up when it comes to working out, and that's very useful for a lot of the careers that I like to use, like firefighter. Your Sims need to be, you know, athletic for that, so I'm gonna put this one in the I sometimes use category. Next up, we have avant-garde. Avant-garde is also gonna go into sometimes. I feel like the sometimes category, y'all, will be really big. You know what, it should have just been 2 categories, sometimes and never use. But avant-garde, I do like this one because it does help out with the street art kit that you can use. You can level up that skill faster, and you can actually sell the art that you make. Sometimes your Sims can get an opportunity to make street art and then you can get money from it. So this is very useful. It came with University, so I would definitely say check it out. Maybe you can apply this one with the artistic and, you know, just get like a double boost or whatever. So I kind of like that. Next up, we have bookworm. I never use this one, okay? Listen, nothing against bookworm in general. I mean, it's cool. You know, your Sims get fun faster from reading and they can read a little bit faster, but I never use this one, especially not for YouTube or Twitch, because I mean, it's just sometimes okay to watch a sim go to sleep or watch a sim read or get on the computer. But if I'm playing for a YouTube video or Twitch, I want to see my sims doing something, and reading is not one of those things unless we have to do it for a skill or something like that. But otherwise, if they reading something, it's like ×3 speed. So I never really use this one. Next up, we have Born Salesperson, and I don't ever really use this one. This one is really useful for consignment stores and selling stuff back to consignment stores and gaining relationship with people at consignment stores like the sales clerk, but I don't ever use this one or think about it. So it's gonna go into the I never use category. It came with the Sims 3 Ambitions, if you were wondering. I just don't ever use it. Next up, we have Bot Fan. I don't ever use this one either. No. It's kind of cool that your Sims can like put on the cardboard boxes and stuff and look like a robot, but I never use this one. I feel like this is one of those traits that just kind of exist. Kind of fun to play around with every once in a while, but I don't ever think about this one, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have Brave. Brave is gonna go in the sometimes use category. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I like to use this one because Brave Sims can fight off burglars, and I don't know about y'all, but I seem to have a lot of bad luck when it comes to burglars in the game and them trying to break into my house and steal stuff. So I really only use this one for that feature. I mean, I really only use this trait for just for that one feature to fight off burglars, but otherwise I think it's a pretty useful trait though, so it's gonna go into sometimes use. Next up, we have a Brooding. I don't ever use this one. It's a cool trait. I have used it in the past, but I don't really like this trait that much because your Sims get so stressed out if they don't brood. You have to literally make them just sit there and contemplate life or just chill or think about whatever. If not, they get really stressed out and upset by it, and it's like, dude, we get it, relax. So I don't ever use this one. Can't Stand Art. Never use this one. Don't ever think about this one. It just exists for me. It's gonna go into never use. Charismatic. Oh my gosh, y'all. Charismatic is gonna go in the sometimes use category. I like this trait because conversations with charismatic Sims tend to go a little bit better than they would a normal Sim. And I like the idea of Sims smoothing over other Sims and just kind of getting on their good side and stuff like that and kind of, you know, just talking them up. I like the idea of that. So it's gonna go in the sometimes use. Next up, we have Childish. Never use, never think about. It exists for me. That's about it. It's gonna go into never use category. Next up, we have Clumsy. I don't ever use this one intentionally. If my sim has it, it's because I randomized for it. It's gonna go in the I never use category. Next up, we have Commitment Issues. I don't ever use this one ever. When I play, especially off camera, I like to have my perfect little families and stuff like that, and it's very rare that I will ever use this unless I'm trying to make some drama or something like that, or if I just have a sim that doesn't want to get tied down with anyone. But otherwise, I don't ever really use this one, so it's gotta go into I never use category. Next up, we have Computer Whiz. I don't ever use this one either. So I think Computer Whiz is pretty interesting. Your sim can hack into the computer between, I forgot the time frames, but it can hack the computers and get money from them. They can also hack into like the system and make themselves have VIP access to certain areas that are restricted to them. But other than that, I don't really ever use this one or really think about it that much. So for me, it's going to go into never use. Couch Potato. Never use. Listen, a sim can be lazy, but sometimes I want them to be active and do things, and this just kind of conflicts with that, so never use. Next up, we have Coward. I never use this one either. Coward is kind of annoying to play around with because sometimes when your sim sees Bonehilda, they'll run into the other direction, and I really like using Bonehilda to clean my houses because she does it for free. So, yeah, that's kind of conflicted with that, so we're gonna put that in never use. Next up, we have Daredevil. I don't ever use this one either. I think it's kind of fun that you can have sims watch your sim eat dirt, you know, but otherwise, I never really use this one, so it's gonna go in a never use category. Same thing with Disciplined. I don't ever use this one either. So yeah, we're just gonna put that in a never use. Next up, we have Dislikes Children. I don't ever use this one. Again, I like to play with families, so this kind of just conflicts with that, so nah, never use it. Next up, we have Diva. I use Diva a lot, y'all. Listen, Latricia has the Diva trait. I use this all the time, and I just like sims that are kind of just all about themselves and all just kind of self-absorbed sometimes, so I like that trait. Next up, we have Dramatic. I tend to use this one a lot too. I'm kind of a dramatic person in real life. I feel like my friends and family can tell you that, so it's only natural that I use this on my sims. Again, Latricia is also dramatic, so I'm gonna put it in the always use. All right, next up, we have Easily Impressed, and this is a trait that I sometimes use. I like to use this trait for some of the same reasons that I like Charismatic, because, you know, your sims can like boast and, you know, talk themselves up, and they get easily impressed by conversations and stuff like that. So I just like using it in that regard. Next up, we have Eccentric. I sometimes use this. I feel like I use this trait primarily because of the name and not so much the actual benefits of having it. This trait is really good for the inventing skill and stuff like that. I think your sims can discover inventions a little bit faster, but I mostly use this one just on the name Eccentric. I think of like sims that are, you know, eccentric. They have like kind of odd taste, but very tasteful and stuff like that. But yeah, I only use this one basically because of the name, not so much of the gameplay. So oof. Next up, we have Eco-Friendly. I don't ever use this one either, y'all. I think it's kind of cool that we have a trait trait like this in the game. And of course, you know, I like my Sims to care about the environment, but I don't ever really use this one personally. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I like for my Sims to take a car and a taxi, and you know, eco-friendly Sims get stressed out by that. Sometimes they throw up. So yeah, I don't really ever use this one. Next up, we have Evil. I use Evil a lot. Let's be real here. I love an Evil Sim. It's always a fun time to play around with a Sim that's a little bit devious. So I'm just gonna put this one I always use because I use it quite a lot. Next up, we have Excitable. I'm gonna put this one in the sometimes use. I feel like Excitable and Easily Impressed are very, very similar. You will find that a lot of the traits in this game are extremely similar to other traits, so much so that it's like, why did this exist? But, you know, hey, it's good to have two traits that are alike, right? So I'm gonna also just put this in a sometimes use. I like having Excitable Sims. I think it's just kind of fun to play around with. Next up, we have Family Oriented. I always use this one, y'all. Listen, I'm a family simmer. I love Generation. Y'all know I love my legacy challenges and my legacy stories. This is going to be in the always use. Next up, we have Flirty. I always use this one because it's a good trait to have, especially when you want your Sims to go on dates. And if you want your Sims to have like a higher chance at a relationship, Flirty is what you put on, okay? Latricia is also flirty. I always use this trait, okay? Next up, we have Good. Good is gonna be something that I use sometimes. I do like to have good traits. I feel like the good trait is something that I tack onto a Sim. Usually when I just need one more slot to fill up and I don't want them to have like a negative trait, I'll just give them the good one. Next up, we have Frugal. I'm gonna put this one in the sometimes use because I think it's kind of cool to have Sims clip coupons and they get like special deals and stuff like that. And you can go to the store and get like a discount on an item. I think that's really cool. I like the fact that your Sims can like, you know, clap and turn the lights off when they're not in the room. I think that's really cool. I'm a very frugal person in real life. Honestly, this should be an always use, but I don't always use it for my own personal gameplay. But if I did, it would definitely be an always use because this trait is basically me. I'm very frugal. I don't really like spending money in real life if I can help it. So it's gonna go in the sometimes use. Next up, we have Gatherer. Gatherer is a really good trait to have. I like it a lot. It helps you with gathering collectibles and stuff like that out in the world, but I never use this one at all. And that's so weird. You know what? I have to change this. You know what? I want to put this one in the honorary sometimes use. It needs to probably be put in the always use. This trait would be very useful for legacy challenges or really just most challenges in general, but I never use this one. I think the thing about The Sims 3 is there's so many traits in the game that I feel like a lot of people either gloss over traits or never really use a lot of them. And this is one of the ones I never use. I know what it does. It's very useful, especially if you use it with one of the lifetime rewards that you can get. I forgot the name of it, but there's a lifetime reward that helps you find items in the world. I think it's called Collection Helper, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's super useful for that too. Like use these things in tandem. But I don't ever use it that often, so it's gonna go in the I never use category. Next up, we have Genius. I'm gonna put this in a sometimes use. I like using this trait, but I don't use it all the time because I like for my Sims to have a little struggle to them. I think it's fun that way. So yeah, I just put this in a sometimes. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Oh, you know what, y'all? This one is actually good. This one is good and that one is friendly. I get them mixed up. But honestly, it's the same reason for both of these. If I need my Sim to have an additional good trait, I just put this one there. They're, like I said, friendly and good. Very, very similar to me. So we're gonna put these in the same thing. Next up, we have a good sense of humor. This is something that I also use sometimes. I'm gonna put this trait in the sometimes, and honestly, I use this trait for the same reasons that I use, you know, Easily Impressed and Charismatic and stuff like that, because they're so similar and they're really good for social interactions. So I put this one in the sometimes use. Next up, we have Great Kisser. I feel like you can just tell what kind of person I am by this list so far. But listen, Great Kisser, love it. Use it a lot in The Sims. It's very good for relationships. And when you play legacy style like I do, you need those traits sometimes, okay? At least I need them, so it's gonna go in the always use. Next up, we have Green Thumb, and I'm gonna put this in a never use category, only because I never use it. It's a great trait to have, especially for gardening. Yo, literally, I feel like I just nerf myself so much when I do legacy style. I make it so much harder than it has to be, because honestly, if I put these two traits on a Sim, we good to go. Okay, you can find stuff better, you can grow stuff better, but no, I just never use those. So it's gonna go in never use, but honestly, y'all, these are really good traits, okay? Next up, we have Grumpy. Never use Grumpy, never think about Grumpy. It exists. Handy. Y'all, I always use Handy on the Sim. I don't know what it is about a handiness trait, but it's just kind of good to have it on the Sim. Listen, you never know when something's gonna break down. You never know when you might need to repair something. It's good to have because things, at least in my games, break down all the time. And I have this mod that I normally play around with. It's called 9 New Death Types, and it adds more death to your game. And one of the deaths being that your Sims can die if the house is too junky, and for me, that's kind of often. I like using this one especially for when the sinks start leaking and stuff. So yeah, very useful for me. All right, next up we have Hate Stay Outdoors. I never use this one. My Sims are always leaving and doing stuff, so I need for them to go outside for that, so I don't ever use this one. Next up we have Heavy Sleeper. I don't ever apply this to my Sim manually. If they get it, it's because, you know, they get it. I think it's kind of useful, especially if you use the gym cutting machine, because your Sims can kind of sleep through it. Light Sleeper, on the other hand, is the opposite. They will wake up. I feel like most Sims wake up with the gym cutting machine though, but for this trait in particular, never really use it. Next up, we have Hopeless Romantic. I always use this one for the same reasons as the other ones, y'all. It's very good for relationships, and I love using it. Next up, we have Hot Headed, and I'm gonna put this one in the sometimes used category. It's kind of good to have a Sim that's not quite evil, but not quite all the way good, and I feel like Hot Headed is kind of in the center point for that, so I'm gonna put this one in the sometimes used. I don't always apply it to a Sim, but I use it often enough, if that makes sense. Next up, we have Hydrophobic. Never use this one. I like for my Sims to go to the beach and the pool. Don't use this one. Next up, we have Inappropriate. I never apply this to a Sim. This trait is kind of funny because your Sims are basically a mess. They can rummage through trash. They can kiss other Sims even if they're enemies. This trait makes your Sim a mess. So I think it's funny, but I just never use it personally. So it's going to go in the never use category. Next up, we have Insane. This is going to go in the never use category. It's really annoying to play around with because your Sims will always switch outfits. You can have them have a really great outfit. They will switch and put something else on. It's annoying. I don't ever use this one. It's going in and never use. Next up, we have Irresistible. I don't even need to explain for this one. Just know I always use it, okay? Next up is Kleptomaniac, and I'm going to put this one in the always use category. I always use this one, especially on Twitch and YouTube. It's really cool to just break into Sims houses and steal from them and sell it. So yeah, I like using that. Next up, we have a Light Sleeper. Never use this one at all. We have a Loner. I never use this one at all, so that's also going to go in the never use category. Loser. Never really use this one either. I mean, listen, y'all, I never use it. Loves the Coal. I don't ever use this one. Loves the Heat. I never used that one either. These came with seasons, and they're okay traits, but I don't ever use these, y'all, or think about them that much. So it's going to go in the never use category. All right, next up, we have Loves the Outdoors. Never use, never think about at all. Just gonna put that in the never use category. Next up, we have Loves to Swim. I'm gonna put this one in the never use category either. Never use it. Don't ever really think about this one. Sorry, it's going in and never use. Next up, we have Lucky. I don't ever use this one either. It's a really cool trait to have, but I just don't ever use it that often, so it's gonna go in a never use category. Next up, we have a Mean Spirited. I also never really use this one. Again, what is the difference between a mean spirited Sim, a grumpy Sim, and an evil Sim? I mean, I guess I could see more so the difference between grumpy and evil, but like evil and mean spirited, and even Hot Headed, they're so similar, you know what I'm saying? But I never use this one in particular, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have a Mooch. I never use this one either. So it's gonna go to never use. Next up, we have Natural Born Performer. Never use this one either. Next up, we have Natural Cook. I sometimes use this one. I like for my Sims to sometimes have an edge up in the kitchen when it comes to cooking and stuff like that. So I'm going to put this one in the sometimes use. Next up, we have Neat. And I sometimes use this trait only when I want my Sim to kind of clean up and keep their space kind of tidy. I'll use it. But otherwise, if I never really use it, I get a bone holder for that. But I'm going to put it in the sometimes use. Next up, we have Neurotic. I never use this one. Never think about it. It's going in the never used. Next up, we have Never Nude. This is also a trait that I never use or think about. It's going in the never use category. Same thing for Night Owl. I think this one is kind of useful, especially if you have a Sim that likes to go out at night and do nightlife stuff, but I don't ever personally use it, so it's going in the never use category. Next up, we have No Sense of Humor. Never use this one either. Going in the never use category. Next up, we have Nurturing. Nurturing is going to go into sometimes use. I don't always use this one. I'm more likely to use the family oriented trait than the nurturing trait, even though they're kind of similar and they kind of, you know, can work good together, but I never really use the nurturing one that often, so it's going to go into sometimes use for me. Next up, we have Over Emotional. I never use this one at all, so it's gonna go in the never use. Next up, we have Party Animal. You know, Elliot is a party animal. I should probably put this one in the always use category because I'm always playing with Elliot, especially for world overview videos. But honestly, if I'm being honest, y'all, I gotta put this one in the sometimes use. I don't always have party animal Sims. I think it's kind of cool how they can dance on the countertops and stuff like that, but otherwise, I don't ever really use this one in my personal gameplay outside of Elliot, of course. But yeah, it's gonna go in the sometimes used category though. Next up, we have Perceptive. I like using this one from time to time to find out other Sims traits, so it's gonna go into sometimes used. Next up, we have Perfectionist. I'm gonna put this one into sometimes used. I do use this one sometimes, especially if I want a sim that's kind of, you know, perfect, so to speak, but it's kind of annoying because Sims with a Perfectionist trait will not use a toilet if it's dirty. And I'm like, dude, you're really gonna peel yourself because the toilet is a little bit dirty? Like, please get it together. Next up, we have Photographer's Eye. Never use this one. Don't ever think about it. I know it's kind of useful if you like photography, but I never use it or think about it, so it's going in the never use. Next up, we have Proper. Never use this one either. It's going in the never use category. Next up, we have Rebellious. I never really use this one on my Sims that often either, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have Sailor. Sailor is one of my favorite traits, but honestly, if I'm being real with y'all, I never use it. Like, it could be my favorite and I just never use it. Sailor is one that I never use. Elliot is a sailor also, but I don't ever use it. Next up, we have Salvi Sculptor. I don't ever use this one either. I need to start using a lot of these traits. You know, if anything, this video has taught me so far to use more traits. But Salvi Sculptor, never really use it that much. I know it's very useful, but I don't ever use it. Next up, we have Smoozer. And honestly, I need to put this in a sometimes category alongside, you know, charismatic and easily impressed and excitable and stuff like that. But honestly, y'all, I don't ever use this trait that much. It's gotta go in a never use. I know some of y'all are like, CJ, how? You like to smooth Sims, but you don't use a Smoozer trait? I don't use it. So many traits in this game are so similar to the other ones that I only really gravitate towards certain ones. This one needs to go up here, but I don't ever use it personally, so it's got to go down here. If I'm being honest, this is my honest opinion, y'all. Never use it that much. Next up, we have Shy. I don't use this one at all. Next up, we have Slob. Never use this one at all either. We have Snob. Never use that one either. Social Butterfly. Social Butterfly is something that I sometimes use. Latricia is also a social butterfly, but I don't use it that often in my own personal gameplay, so it's gonna have to go into sometimes. Next up, we have Socially Awkward. I don't ever use this one either, so it's gonna go into never used. Next up, we have Star Quality. I don't ever use this one that often either, so it's gonna go into never used category. Next up, we have Supernatural Fan and Supernatural Skeptic. I never use these at all. It's kind of funny though, because I use these as my like and dislike emotes in my Discord server and I never use them in the real game, so there we go. Next up, we have Technophobe. Don't ever use this one either. If anything, it's kind of annoying to play around with because I like for my Sims to use technology, so it kind of contradicts with what I like to play with, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have Unflirty. I never use this one. Listen, y'all, if I'm always using flirty, then that means I'm never really using unflirty, right? So yeah, it's gonna go into never used. Next up, we have Unlucky. I don't ever use this one that often, but it is really useful. I should probably start using this, honestly, because your Sims can only die of old age if you have the Unlucky trait, and if your Sims die by any other means, the Grim Reaper will laugh at them and will resurrect them. So it's very useful. I should probably use this for Nightmare Legacy, but I never really use it that much, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have Unstable. This one is probably my least favorite trait in the whole entire game. It is so annoying to play around with, y'all. So if you don't know what this trait is, essentially your Sims get new traits every single day, and you have to have them be admitted to the hospital to get it fixed. It's kind of annoying because I don't always want my Sims to get random traits. You get like a moodlet that pops up, and if you let the moodlet run out, then your Sims permanently get those traits until the next day, and then it starts over again. I don't like this trait at all. Very annoying to play around with. Never use it. If a Sim has it, it's because it's randomized, and I just gotta deal with it. But otherwise, I don't ever really use or think about this trait, so it's definitely going in the never use category. Next up, we have Vegetarian. Same thing. I never really have my Sims become vegetarians, so never used. Next up, we have a Vehicle Enthusiast. I don't ever really use this one that often. I think it's a cool trait, but honestly, I don't ever really use this one. I think it's kind of cool though that your Sim does have a relationship with their car or their vehicle. It'll be like in their relationship panel, but other than that, I don't really think about it that often, so it's gonna go in the never use category. Next up, we have Virtuoso. I don't ever use this one either. I know it's useful, but I don't ever use this one, so it's gonna go in the never use. And then last but not least, we have Workaholic. My Sims are not workaholics, y'all. They're not. And if they get it, it's because it's randomized, so it's gonna go in the never use category. But anyway, y'all, that is how I rank every single Sims 3 trait. Again, pets isn't on this list, but all my pets traits would go into sometimes use because sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. So they're gonna go into sometimes category. But other than that, this is how I rank every Sims 3 trait. So I want to know, how would you rank these traits? Leave me your list down below. What are your always, your sometimes use, and your never use traits? I really want to know. But anyway, y'all, that is all that I have for this video. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to leave a like, comment something down below, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye! Thanks for watching.